Hello, and welcome back to another deep dive. It's really great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
So today we are tackling a subject that I honestly think haunts, well, probably a massive percentage of the adult population.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that one item on the to-do list that gets written down every single January 1st, and then it just slowly,
Quietly gets pushed to the next year.
exactly, the next year and the next. I'm talking, of course, about learning a second language.
The eternal New Year's resolution. I mean, it's right up there with, running a marathon or finally writing that novel.
It really is, and the statistics on this are actually kind of brutal. I was looking at some numbers earlier, and the drop-off rate for language learning apps is just staggering,
Oh, yeah, it's a cliff.
right? We have millions of people starting with the best intentions, downloading the little owl app on the heavy textbooks and doing the streak for, what, a week?
Maybe a month if they're
Yeah.
really dedicated.
Yeah, maybe a month. And then just silence.
Yeah.
There was this massive gap between studying a language, like filling in the blanks, matching vocabulary words, and actually mastering it.
Right.
That moment where you can just open your mouth and exist in that language without sweating entirely through your shirt.
Yeah, that's what we call the great filter of language learning. Because
Hmm.
most people, they get stuck in what is essentially a collection phase.
The collection phase, I like that.
Yeah, they collect words, they collect grammar rules, and they just stack them up in their brain like dusty books on a shelf. But they never actually cross over into fluency.
They never take the books off the shelf to read them.
Exactly. And that is exactly why I'm so excited about the text we're breaking down for you today.
Yes, the text for this session, it's titled The Architecture of Linguistic Mastery. And right off the bat, I have to say, that title really grabbed me.
Because it's provocative,
Right. It doesn't say the textbook or the guide. It says architecture.
which implies a structure.
Right.
It implies that fluency isn't something you just acquire by, osmosis or by staring at a glowing screen long enough. It's something you have to actively build,
Brick by brick.
brick by brick, according to a very specific blueprint.
And this text, it claims to be that blueprint. It challenges a lot of the traditional classroom methods that we all grew up with. You know the drill. Open your textbook to page 45 and conjugate this verb.
The worst.
So let's start right at the top.
Yeah.
What is the mission statement here? If we strip away the academic jargon, what is this source actually telling us to do differently?
Well, the core argument is that we need to move away from simple memorization
Okay.
and move towards a completely holistic process. The text argues that we've basically been treating language like a history test.
Oh, like memorizing dates and facts.
Right, when we really should be treating it more like a sport or, like playing a musical instrument. It's about performance, not just static knowledge.
It's about what you do, not just what you know.
Ex-
I really love that distinction. And we're going to unpack that sport analogy heavily a bit later because the physical aspect of this really surprised me. But looking at our roadmap for today, we have three main pillars to get through.
3 pillars of the architecture.
Right. First, we have the numbers, the specific vocabulary benchmarks you need just to survive. Second, the mental game, which is specifically how to kill that translator living in your head.
That is the hardest part for most people. That internal voice is so stubborn.
So stubborn. And then third, the physical and social habits, the actual gym of language learning.
Yeah.
So if you are listening to this right now and you've felt stuck, or maybe you're prepping for a big trip, or you just want to know why your high school Spanish didn't stick despite 4 years of classes, stay with us because we're moving from being students to being architects today.
Let's start building.
All right, pillar one, the raw materials. If you want to build a house, you clearly need bricks. If you want to speak a language, you need words. But the question is always, how many?
Always the first question people ask.
Right. I feel like I've seen estimates ranging from, 500 words just to survive a weekend trip, all the way up to 20,000 words to read a novel. But this source throws down a very specific gauntlet.
It does. It focuses heavily on the number 3,000.
3,000 words. Now, I have to be honest here. When I first saw that number, I had a really mixed reaction.
How so?
Well, on one hand, writing out 3,000 flashcards sounds like an absolute nightmare. But on the other hand, for an entire language, that seems, I don't know, manageable. Like, I'm pretty sure I know 3,000 facts about Star Wars alone.
Right. It is deceptively manageable, but we need to clarify what that number actually represents in the text.
Okay.
The source isn't saying that 3,000 words makes you a poet or a philosopher in your target language. It says 3,000 words is the threshold to navigate most daily interactions.
Define navigate for me in this context. Are we talking about ordering a beer on a beach, or are we talking about filing a complex police report?
It's somewhere right in the middle. Look, linguists often talk about frequency lists. The English language, for example, has hundreds of thousands of words, but we only use a tiny, tiny fraction of them in 90% of our daily speech.
Oh, sure.
So the text suggests that knowing 3,000 words gives you that 90% coverage for daily life.
So I can function.
Yes, you can walk into a bakery, you can ask for directions, you can understand the gist of a news broadcast on the radio, and you can chat with a taxi driver about the weather or the local traffic.
So it's essentially the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the words are doing 80% of the heavy lifting.
Precisely. But here is the massive catch, and the text is very, very firm on this point. There is a huge difference between navigation and true fluency.
Okay, break that down.
Well, you can know 3,000 words perfectly and still sound like a malfunctioning robot.
Like, I want bread, please.
Right. Or you're standing there searching for the word for loaf, and you can only remember the word for slice, so you just panic and point at the bread.
Been there.
We all have. The source explicitly states that while 3,000 is the benchmark for functionality, it's the entry fee. Really true fluency depends on mental and physical training, not just simple memorization.
Oh, that makes sense.
The list is just your inventory. Having a fully stocked pantry doesn't magically make you a master chef.
That is actually a huge relief. Because I think a lot of us really obsess over the raw count. We use those apps that pop up and say, congratulations, you learned 50 new words this week, and we get that little dopamine hit.
Yep.
But the text is saying, great, you have the bricks, but do you actually have a wall? Or do you just have a pile of bricks sitting in your front yard?
And a pile of bricks is pretty useless if it starts raining. The text warns against the simple memorization of isolated terms. You could memorize the entire dictionary, but that doesn't mean you can hold a dynamic conversation.
Which leads us perfectly into the second pillar.
Yeah.
This is the strategy of how we actually learn those 3,000 words.
Yes.
Because apparently most of us are doing it completely wrong. This is the part of the source that really made me look at my old shoebox of flashcards with a lot of regret. The text has a very strong warning about isolated terms.
It really does. It argues that focusing on single words, like learning just apple or just run or blue, is highly inefficient.
Why is that?
Because it creates a fragmented map in your brain.
It's like trying to memorize a song by learning every individual note without ever hearing the melody. You know the notes, but you don't know the music.
That is a fantastic analogy, yes. So the solution the text proposes instead is to prioritize common phrases, or what linguists sometimes call lexical chunks.
Chunks. Okay, so instead of learning the word reservation entirely on its own, what should I be learning?
You learn the whole phrase, I would like to make a reservation.
Oh, the whole thing.
The whole thing. You treat that entire sentence as if it were one single long word. You don't sit there breaking it down grammatically in the beginning. You just absorb the entire block.
But why, though? Is it just for the context? Is it just so I know the proper way to use it in a sentence?
Context is definitely part of it, but the text gives a very specific mechanical reason for this method, and that reason is speed.
Speed. Really. I usually think of speed as the end result of fluency. Like once I'm finally fluent, then I'll be fast. But the text is saying the chunking method creates the speed.
Think about the actual processing power required to speak. If you learn isolated words, every single time you want to say something, your brain has to perform this complex assembly line operation.
Right.
It has to find the subject I, then it has to go find the verb want, then it has to conjugate want into the conditional would like, then it finds the connector to, then the object. That is 5 or 6 separate mental operations just to start a sentence.
And that is exactly why I pause for 5 seconds before I speak in Spanish. My brain is literally buffering. I'm seeing the spinning wheel of death right there in my mind.
Exactly. We all do it. But if you have learned, I would like to make a reservation as a single chunk, a prefab section of the wall, you just grab it and throw it out there.
One operation.
One mental operation. Boom. Done.
Wow. That makes so much sense. You're lowering the cognitive load. You aren't building the car from scratch every single time you just want to drive to the grocery store.
You are hacking your own working memory. The text actually calls these practical habits. It's about building a library of pre-assembled thoughts. It allows you to focus on what you were saying rather than agonizing over how to construct the sentence.
So for you listening right now, this means if you're using flashcards, don't just put one word on the back, put a full sentence.
Or a question, like how much is this? Or where is the bathroom? Or I don't understand. These phrases should be your atomic units of learning, not the individual words.
Okay, so we've got our 3,000 words,
Yeah.
and we're packaging them in chunks to build up our speed. But now we run into the monster. The thing that I think kills fluency more than anything else, the voice.
The internal translator.
The internal translator.
Mm-hmm.
That annoying voice that hears a sentence in Spanish, translates it into English, drafts a response in English, translates it back to Spanish, and then finally tells your mouth to move.
It's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. And the text is incredibly blunt about this. It just says, stop translating.
Quote, strive to stop translating mentally. It's a direct command.
Which sounds a lot like telling someone to just stop being sad.
Hmm.
It's so much easier said than done. Why is this so critical? Like, why can't I just train myself to be a really, really fast translator? Does it matter if I'm fast enough?
It matters because translation is a middleman. And middlemen always cost you time and energy.
True.
As long as you are translating, you are not truly speaking the target language. You are just deciphering it. You're running an emulation layer on top of your brain's operating system.
It's like playing a fast-paced video game, but you have a 2-second lag on your controller. You're always reacting to what happened a moment ago, not what's happening right now.
Yeah. Exactly that. If you are translating, you are listening to the past. By the time you've decoded the first half of a speaker's sentence, they've already finished the second half, and you've completely missed it.
You're left behind.
Right. The text frames this mental shift not just as a nice bonus, but as a completely necessary step for mastery. You have to wire the foreign sound directly to the concept.
Walk me through that. Wiring the sound to the concept. What does that actually look like inside the brain?
Okay, think of the English word fire. When you hear me say fire, you don't think F-I-R-E, that is a noun representing combustion.
No, I just see flames, I feel heat, I react.
Right. It's visceral, it's immediate, that is a direct connection. But if you are learning French and you hear the word feu and your brain goes, okay, feu equals fire, and then you visualize the flames.
That extra step is the killer.
Yes. The goal of the mental training mentioned in the text is to make feu trigger the image of flames immediately without ever touching English at all.
So how do we actually achieve that? How do we delete the English software from that process?
Well, you can't delete it, but you can bypass it. The text suggests this comes from immersion and the repetition of those chunks we talked about earlier. Think about when you say thank you in French merci. You probably don't translate that in your head anymore, right?
No, not at all. Merci just feels like merci. It has its own standalone meaning to me now.
Because you've used it so many times, it has carved out its own neural pathway. The goal is to do that with everything, to widen that circle of direct understanding until it covers those 3,000 foundational words.
Wow.
You want to reach a point where the language isn't a code you're trying to break, but a reality you're directly perceiving.
So it's about sheer repetition until the English just naturally fades away.
Yes, but not just mental repetition. And this is the pivot point in the text that I found most fascinating. Up until now, we've talked about the brain, memory, translation, chunking. But then the text suddenly shifts gears entirely and starts talking about the body.
Right. The physical exercise section. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It really does. The text explicitly states we need to treat speech as a physical exercise.
This struck me so hard because I think we are all conditioned to think of language purely as an intellectual pursuit. It happens in the gray matter. But this source is arguing that language it's meat. It's muscle.
It is absolutely muscle. Just think about the sheer mechanics of it. To produce a sound, you have to coordinate your diaphragm, your vocal cords, your jaw, your tongue, and your lips.
All at once.
All at once. It is a highly complex motor skill, just like shooting a basketball or playing a chord on the piano.
And different languages require completely different gymnastics.
Completely different gymnastics. If you are a native English speaker trying to learn French, you have to push your lips forward in a way that feels totally unnatural, almost exaggerated.
Right.
If you're learning Mandarin, you have to control pitch with your vocal cords in a way English never, ever demands. If you're learning Arabic or German, you're using muscles deep in the back of your throat that have essentially been dormant your entire life.
That perfectly explains why, after a long day of trying to speak a new language on a trip, my face literally physically hurts.
It's DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, but for your mouth. The text emphasizes physical training because your mouth quite literally needs to learn the new choreography.
I see.
You can know the word perfectly in your head, but if your tongue hasn't put in the reps, you will stumble. You'll trip over the syllable.
Doing the reps. I love that imagery. It takes so much pressure off the intellect and puts it onto the body. It means, hey, I'm not stupid, I'm just uncoordinated right now.
Exactly. You wouldn't read a book on the physics of tennis and then expect to walk out and win Wimbledon.
No way.
You have to actually swing the racket. You have to train the muscle memory so that when the ball comes at you, your arm knows exactly what to do without your conscious brain having to direct it.
So if language is a sport, how do we train for the big game? We've got the drills now, the phrases, we've got the conditioning, the physical muscle training, but the text has one final piece of advice
Yeah.
that is, honestly, it's kind of terrifying.
The high pressure environment.
Yeah. It says we need to actively seek out high-pressure social situations. And my instinct is the exact opposite of that. I want a low-pressure situation. I want a totally safe space where nobody is going to laugh at my bad accent. Why on earth would the blueprint for mastery include seeking out stress?
Because comfort is the enemy of growth. The text lists high-pressure situations as, quote, vital for long-term improvement.
Vital, not just an optional challenge.
Vital. Think about what happens in a low-pressure environment. You're sitting on your comfortable couch using a language app. You get a prompt. You can pause. You can stare at the ceiling and think. You can translate. You can even check a dictionary in another tab. There is zero consequence for being slow.
It basically allows all those bad habits to survive. It allows me to keep relying on the crutches.
Exactly. It allows that translation loop to persist forever. But now I want you to imagine you are in a crowded, busy cafe in Rome.
Okay.
There is a line of 5 very impatient people standing behind you. The barista is staring directly at you, waiting. You have to order right now.
My palms are genuinely sweating just hearing you describe that scenario.
Good. That physiological response, that spike of adrenaline, is a forcing function. In that moment, you do not have time to translate. You don't have time to conjugate verbs on a mental chalkboard. Your brain goes straight into survival mode.
It panics.
It panics and it bypasses the slow analytical circuits and desperately grabs for those lexical chunks you've been practicing.
It's literally sink or swim.
It really is. And the text suggests that this kind of pressure cements the learning. The emotional weight of that moment, the fear of looking foolish combined with the massive relief of actually being understood, it marks that memory in your brain with a bright yellow highlighter.
Oh, wow.
You will never, ever forget the word you struggled to find when a whole room of people was watching you.
That is such a powerful reframing of the whole process.
Yeah.
We usually try so hard to avoid those moments because they feel like terrible failures.
Yeah.
We walk away thinking, oh man, I messed up. I sounded like an idiot. But the text is saying, no, that moment where you sweated, that was the actual lesson.
Yeah, that was the heavy lifting. That was the real workout. If you aren't sweating, you aren't building muscle. And if you aren't risking a little embarrassment, you aren't building fluency.
So we need to stop looking for a cozy, quiet classroom and start looking for, well, trouble, linguistic trouble.
Controlled trouble. You need the linguistic data, obviously. That's the 3,000 words. That is your baseline equipment. But you also desperately need the real-world application, the arena.
It really is a holistic system, the mental, the physical, and the emotional, all tied together. It truly is an architecture. You can't just build one wall and call it a house.
You can't, and if you leave out even one pillar, the whole roof collapses. If you have the words but no speed from chunking, you can't converse naturally. If you have the speed but no vocabulary, you have nothing meaningful to say. And if you have both of those but you hide from the social pressure, you'll never actually use the language in the real world.
So let's bring this all back to you, the person listening right now. Maybe you're commuting, maybe you're walking the dog or at the gym, and you've got this language goal. What is the Monday morning takeaway here? How should we change our routine tomorrow based on this deep dive?
I think the main synthesis of this text is that we all need to seriously audit our learning routines. Ask yourself right now, am I just collecting bricks? Am I just memorizing isolated words? If you are, stop. Start building chunks instead. Change every flashcard you have to a full phrase.
And check in on your physical training too. Are you actually speaking out loud or are you just reading quietly on your phone?
Right. If your neighbors don't occasionally think you're talking to yourself, you probably aren't practicing enough. You need to actively fatigue those facial muscles. You have to get completely used to the sound of your own voice speaking that new language.
And finally, the scary part. Go out and find some pressure.
Go find a situation where you might actually fail. Join a local language exchange meetup where you are forced to speak. Travel if you have the means to do so.
And if you can't travel?
If you can't travel, go find a local restaurant or market where your target language is spoken and force yourself to order in that language. Put yourself in a position where retreating into silence just isn't an option.
It really brings me back to that initial question about why we fail so often at this.
Hmm.
I wonder, and this is just a thought, I wonder if we fail simply because we treat language like an academic subject to be studied, like
Same.
algebra, when we should be treating it like a skill to be performed,
Mm.
like playing jazz or playing basketball.
That is the perfect question to end on, I think.
Yeah.
If you treated basketball the exact same way most adults treat learning Spanish, you would spend 5 straight years just reading books about the history of the dribble.
Right.
You'd never actually touch a physical ball. And then you'd
Okay.
walk onto a court and wonder why you can't play the game.
And after missing every shot, you'd probably just quit.
You would absolutely quit. So the lesson is, stop studying and start training.
Stop studying. Start training. I think I'm genuinely going to print that out and put it on my wall. That's the ultimate message. Thank you so much for breaking this fascinating blueprint down with us today. This architecture of linguistic mastery really does offer a totally different and frankly much better kind of learning.
It was an absolute pleasure to explore it with you.
And to you listening, good luck with your training out there. Go make those mistakes. Go get messy with it. And remember, the embarrassment just means the workout is working. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.